Hello, and welcome to Fertility Café. I'm your host, Eloise Drain. Today, I have the pleasure. Okay, all right. I think we have everything set up. And just as a FYI, and I'm also saying it as we're recording, if there is something that you mess up or want to redo or say over or what, I mean, you have a podcast, so you understand the editing process.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's anything that you would like to say over, just say redo, and then my editor will obviously hear and he'll know to that we're going to start that segment over or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. So again, I'm going to start with the intro and then we'll just hop right into the questions. Sorry, and of course, all of a sudden now my throat now wants to act a fool, but we'll get there. Hello, and welcome to Fertility Cafe. I'm your host, Eloise Drain. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Erica McAfee. I did say your last name right, right?
It's McAfee.
McAfee. Okay, so we're
Hmm.
going to start that over again. Just, I should have asked that, and I meant to, and I forgot. Okay, sorry. Good thing about editing. We can do these things over again. Hello, and welcome to Fertility Cafe. I'm your host, Eloise Drain. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Erica McAfee. Erica is the founder and CEO of Sisters in Loss, a maternal child health company that helps Black women replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. She's also a certified birth and bereavement doula, doula trainer and mentor, and mom to two babies in heaven and one rainbow baby, Maxwell, also known as Super Mighty Max. Sisters in Loss provides pregnancy, birth, postpartum, bereavement, and grief services to help women step beyond anxiety and fear and into trust and peace after loss. Its self titled podcast spotlights resilient Black mothers who share intimate details of their journey to motherhood through painful but inspirational loss and infertility stories. Welcome, Erica, to the show. So great to have you join me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm very excited. We have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
So, you are a chemical engineer, a preacher's wife, you're a special needs mom to 6-year-old Super Mighty Max, your rainbow baby, you're a grief
Hmm.
specialist, a doula, and on top of all of that, you have created this platform for resources, encouragement, and connection for women who are experiencing loss. Like, yeah, you're busy.
Yes, I have. It's been such a an assignment that I'm on now, and I'm grateful to be able to connect people this way and give them alternative tools to on their journey to motherhood.
Mhm. And in the sister-in-law's podcast has close to 200 published episodes and over 7,500 social followers. I mean, you've held summits and events and helped to support and normalize loss for countless women. So I'm curious, did you have all of this in mind when you first decided to share your story, or like what was your initial goal?
No, I did not have this in mind. Obviously, I have been an avid podcast listener prior to starting a podcast, and most of the podcasts that I listened to were more, like almost like NPR, talk radio, finance, motivational self help, and I really didn't listen to many podcasts that focused on loss and infertility until I started wanting to go down the road of exploring gestational surrogacy, and that's how I connected
Mhm.
with you to
That's
come on the
right.
podcast.
Yep.
And I really wanted to explore that part of it along with sharing my story. Obviously, since I started the podcast back in August of 2017, and it grew so much within that first year that when this all happened around the same time. Michelle Obama's book came out.
Mhm.
Gabrielle Union started to share more about
Journey.
her struggle through endometriosis, adenomyosis, and struggled through getting pregnant. And their Candy Burris talked about her journey to motherhood. This all came out around the same time in that October, November, December of 2018. And I realized then that, oh my gosh, I'm going to actually have more stories than I can even place on the podcast, because a lot more people are more willing to share because they've seen, other influential women who have gone through the same struggles. They've gone through loss. They've gone through a journey through IVF and using alternative reproductive treatments, or using IUIs to try to get pregnant, or that may not be in the cards for them, and they are going down the route of what does it look like for a Black couple in the US to actually explore gestational surrogacy and have a gestational carrier. And I wanted to give us that place to have those conversations. So no, I would say just my birth story in general, losing two babies, having a traumatic birth with my rainbow baby Maxwell really got me into this work. But I realized then, a year into it, that it was bigger than me. I was figured that this is a great platform for people to share their stories, but also get a wealth of knowledge on their journey to parenthood, no matter what it looks like. Because obviously everyone has this idea in their mind that, they, have a normal menstruation cycle, they ovulate once a month, they have this 6-day window, they get pregnant, and then 9 months, 10 months later, a baby comes. But that
Mhm.
is not everybody's case. And in some cases, some people have to use alternative paths to get to become parents, whether that is actually, fostering to adopting, or using a surrogate. And I love what you do, obviously, because you really push this within the community and beyond, but to normalize it by sharing your story about being an egg donor and freezing your eggs, and really getting those resources out there so people will know, there's someone that looks like me that's done this before. I've actually done it, and now I'm helping other people carry out their dreams of becoming parents. So no, it still blows my mind today. I'm like, oh my gosh, when I have people that are in my circle of influence, are people who that weren't there, when I first started, and it's just new people that keep coming in, and I'm just creating new relationships online and offline with people in the community. It's just a overwhelming blessing, and my goal is to continue to connect those people who are really going through the struggle, and giving them that place and that voice to say that they're not alone, that they don't have to remain silent around it, and that they have a sisterhood that's really going to lift them up and support them as they navigate their journey.
Yeah. And I mean, and it is so important to talk about um our own experiences, because I feel like once somebody hears that they're not the only ones going through that, and somebody has already endured it and they're willing to share, what they have experienced, and what they have actually endured, I think really does make a significant impact. I know that one of your taglines for Sisters in Loss is there is testimony in tragedy, and, you're there to help women turn their quote pain into purpose after loss. May I ask for you to tell us a bit about your own journey with loss and in family building?
Yes. So I was married in 2012. Got married in 2012. Shortly found out after that I was expecting. I had been off of birth control for some time. I just didn't like the way the hormones worked with my body. So at the time, I didn't know it. I actually was practicing some fertility awareness, and actually tracking my cycle, and I knew when I ovulated and all of the above, even back then. at 20, I think I was 25 at the time, I actually knew how that process worked, just by, Googling and figuring out how can I maintain and not get pregnant. So I got pregnant. We went through the whole pregnancy, and then got to about 38 weeks. And I started to, it was the time in the pregnancy where you go to the doctor, every week.
Mhm.
And the doctor started to see my blood pressure start to escalate. And we ended up doing 2 appointments that week. I ended up going and doing a 24-hour urine sampling so that they can really see if I was starting to show signs of preeclampsia. So after that analysis was complete, I turned it into the hospital. And then the next morning they called and was just like, we need you to come in. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get admitted and induced. So go ahead and bring everything you need for this baby to the hospital. And my OBGYN clinic was right beside the hospital. So it was, it's just one of those things. You go to the clinic and then we drive around and you're right at the labor and delivery if we need to get you checked in. And essentially that's what happened.
Mhm.
So I went in, at that time I was about 39 weeks, and I went through the induction process overnight. They started Pitocin, went through labor pretty much all day. And then right at shift change, a new doctor came in and they were just like, you're not progressing. Or at that time, I actually was about 10 centimeters, and baby just wouldn't come down through my pelvic bone area, and it was kind of stuck. So since I had an epidural and I couldn't really move, the doctors was just like, okay, well, we're going to give you another 2 hours, and we're going to go ahead and prep you for a C-section. So essentially I pushed for another 2 hours. Baby still wouldn't move, end up doing a C-section. Baby's alive and well, no issues. So got into the C-section room. They cut me open, pulled baby out, and baby squirming, but baby did not cry. And I knew something was wrong then, because most babies cry when they come out, and even in C-section. So the doctors worked fervently on my child for about 41 minutes and then pronounced him dead. Rolled me into the recovery room after they stitched me up, and I was faced with, leaving the hospital empty handed without my son, and
Mhm.
really had to pick up the pieces of my life literally
Mhm.
on my 3-month maternity leave, really trying to understand why this happened to me. So I went through that process, got therapy, got couples therapy, and really tried to get to a place of healing and wholeness that I could try again. And I ended up trying again. I got pregnant again, had another pregnancy. My son ended up having complications due to some overdeveloped lungs. So his lungs just would not oxygenate once he actually was born. And obviously, for those who are listening, your baby's lungs don't have any air pockets in them. Obviously, while they are in utero, you are breathing for them through your placenta, and once babies come out, that's when their lungs start to oxygenate and get air to them. And if there's something wrong with the lungs, if they're under mature or over mature, or just some genetic issue, that their lungs won't actually get the air they need. And essentially that's what happened with my son. They ended up doing an autopsy and testing a lot of his tissue of his lungs to make sure, it wasn't a genetic issue that I would have going into another pregnancy. So with my daughter, we did a bunch of genetic testing. I knew pretty much at like 12 weeks what I was having, because if it was going to be a boy or girl, based off of just wanting to be cautious in that pregnancy. And then I ended up um, having her early, at 18 weeks, due to another issue, cervical insufficiency, where my cervix opened up early, just due to the weight of the baby in the second trimester. So both of those losses happened within the first 2 years of my marriage. It was devastating. I mean, we went through it all, the ups and the downs, and just really trying to acknowledge and understand, why our faith was being tested in that way, and why couldn't I sustain a pregnancy. It was, I didn't have an issue on the fertility front of actually getting pregnant. It was just staying pregnant for me, or being able to bring a healthy baby home. And I really struggled with that. I struggled with my faith, and just asking God, why did I go through this? Why are you really testing me? Why me? Am I supposed to go through this to help others? I really had to journal it out and really work through my feelings of grief, and then what people expected of me, whether it was in the church or my family or just my friend circle at the time. And I got to a place where I was comfortable with sharing more, and being more vocal about it, on my personal social media, whether it was Facebook or Instagram at the time. And I got confident enough to try again. So we tried again. We got pregnant with my son. And with my son, the third pregnancy, there was just everything that I could have done in the previous two pregnancies, I did in that third pregnancy. I journaled, I took pictures every week. I documented everything. I had multiple doctors, a perinatologist or a maternal fetal medicine specialist at MFM. So I saw two doctors. Essentially was in the doctor's office every week or every 2 weeks
Mhm.
because I just wanted to make sure that this baby was good, that nothing was going to happen. I ended up having a surgery about 19 weeks, or cerclage, or cervical stitch placed, so that I wouldn't have a premature, go into premature labor like I did with my daughter, my second pregnancy. And I got all the way up to 32 weeks in that pregnancy. Ended up going into the hospital just feeling some abdominal pain. It wasn't labor, because I knew what labor felt like with my prior two pregnancies. And the doctors immediately rolled me back and did a crash emergency C-section. They worked on me for about 5 hours
Oh my.
before my husband had to make the decision to give me a hysterectomy. I lost so much blood. I had to get 9 blood transfusions. My family was called in, because my blood platelet count was so low. I mean, I literally almost lost my life having my son, and that was due to a placenta abruption, where my placenta, it wasn't like a partial abruption, or my entire placenta completely detached from my uterus. So it was just a lot of hemorrhaging. My son was born not breathing. They had to resuscitate him. He was able to be resuscitated. And as a result of that, my son has cerebral palsy, the more severe form of cerebral palsy, because of the lack of oxygen to his brain when he was born.
Mhm.
But he is the light of my world. I'm
Mhm.
blessed to have a rainbow baby. Yes, although he is differently abled, we know that his life serves a purpose here on earth, and that there's a ministry in everything that he does. I always say there's a ministry in his smile, because just all of the pain and the things that he has to endure, not being able to physically do a lot of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis, but also just um all of the pain that came prior to him to being here, to being here on earth and being our miracle child. So that is where I am now. So I'm on my own infertility journey, where I don't have a uterus, and I still have my fallopian tubes, I still have my ovaries,
Mhm.
and I'm exploring options around that. So
Mhm.
that is a little bit about my journey up until
Good
now.
Lord. Oh, my God, so many questions. So, well, first, I'm curious, did you feel alone, or did you like going through this process, did you feel supported when you went through all of these challenges, and not just family and friends or whatever, but even supportive with the medical community? And I know there's kind of a couple of questions in here, but also in regard to the medical community, do you feel that they did everything that they could have possibly done for all three of your pregnancies?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. For my first pregnancy, the doctor woman who delivered me, um, um actually, she just so happened to be the lady on call. And for those who are listening, mostly when you go to OBGYN clinic, you typically see every doctor who's there, just because you just never know who's going to be on call.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't until and I had that loss where she took an interest in me, and she was just like, we're gonna do everything in our power to make sure that you can bring a baby home. So in that case, I ended up staying with that same OBGYN provider. I had her and another doctor work closely together in my second pregnancy. So when I did lose that second pregnancy, like I said, I did not feel like it was their fault. Obviously, one thing when it comes to any type of cervical issues or issues in the uterus, whether it's, any other underlying conditions like fibroids, endometriosis, typically a lot of OBGYNs will refer you out for specialists. In my case, I did not have anything that was blocking my uterus. The issues that I had were more ovary type issues like ovarian cysts. And my doctors felt like, if I didn't really have an issue getting pregnant, it was just, sustaining the pregnancy. So they felt like I didn't necessarily need to see a specialist or maternal fetal medicine, doctor to really talk about that issue. So I ended up going to one of those just because of the cervical issue that I had and making sure that my cervix was still strong in my third pregnancy. But I ended up seeing two doctors throughout my second pregnancy at the same clinic, as well as the same two doctors in my third pregnancy. And just so happened that when I went to the emergency room for my third pregnancy, it was the same doctor who was on call who delivered my son.
Wow.
So she saved my life. She
Mm-hmm.
delivered my son, 2 years prior, stillborn, right? And then she literally saved my life in delivering my rainbow baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I truly believe in making sure you're picking providers
Mm-hmm.
who are going to advocate for you as if they're your children. It doesn't matter what color their skin looks like. You just want someone to know that you're being heard. If she did not, when the doctor came into the ER and labor delivery and she saw me, she knew me, right? She knew my story. She knew I had two prior losses. She knew how much I wanted that pregnancy. And she immediately, I literally was in the labor and delivery room no less than 15 minutes. Like, they had just hooked the monitors up to my stomach and immediately rolled me back to the emergency room, because she knew how strenuous and how time sensitive the issue was. If she would have waited 10, 15 more minutes, I don't think I would be alive, because that's how much blood that was in my abdomen. So for me to have that care that I received, I think, and for the attention to detail that those doctors did for me, was paramount on me not being a statistic around, Black infant and maternal mortality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of that morbidity number, obviously, because I almost lost my life. But thank God she knew me. She knew my story. We had a relationship.
Yep.
So she fought for me by saving, working all she could. I'm telling you, it was 5 hours. It literally
Mm-hmm.
was 5 hours. They sent my husband home because they didn't want him to have to worry. They sent him home and told him, hey, I need you to leave the hospital. They're still going to work to try to save her. So before he had to make the decision in order to really stop the bleeding and the hemorrhaging that was happening, to give me a hysterectomy. But yeah, I credit having a provider that I know that trusted me, that really heard me when I told her that I know what labor feels like. This ain't labor, and she trusted everything I said and used her instincts and reacted based on that. So for those of us who may think we need to switch providers based on our past history of losses or just infertility and just not being heard, switch those providers. Find someone who's listening. Find someone who really specializes in you,
That's
and
right.
know that they're going to advocate for you when you're unconscious and you can't speak for yourself.
That's right.
So I think that highly definitely had a huge a huge function on why I am able to really share my story the way I am, is because it just so happened she happened to be there. Now, if it was another doctor who was on call, granted, I believe God had his hand in all of this, because who would have known the one day I went to the emergency room in the middle of the day, she would have been that person on call.
Mhm.
I would have never, that nothing was nothing but God having his hand into that part of the story. But because I had a relationship with her, she fought for me just like I was her child.
Yeah, which is amazing, and that's exactly what you want in a medical provider. Just,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of whether it's pregnancy or whether it's something else, you want somebody that will speak up for you when you can't do it for yourself. So, and and going back to the first part of the question, and I'm sorry that I made it two part, but what about your family and friends, especially going through all the losses? And I know you mentioned that you were open about sharing it, but how do you think, or how do you feel you felt supported by them?
Yes, I feel like my family and friends surrounded me with love. They may not known what to say and how to say it, but just being there, just looking at me, just doing what they knew how to do by, whether it was cooking or cleaning or just, ordering my favorite desserts. Like, it's just being there was enough. I can remember at the time we lived further away from our family, so my family literally would got in their car and drove 4 or 5 hours just to look at me, just to make sure that I was okay, and that I was grieving the way I should be grieving, and that everything, I didn't have to worry about just any of the other household activities and things. They really took care of me in that manner. And it was recently during the holidays where I talked to my mom about this, and my mom was on a phone call talking to one of her friends, and I overheard her state that she had 3 grandchildren. And I was like, 3 grandchildren? And I had to think about it for a minute. She's talking about my other 2 babies who are in heaven. And she said it with so much pride and how proud she was. And it just touched my heart, because I don't think I've ever heard my mom articulate it that way, where she mentions her grandbabies that are in heaven. And that lets me know that it really let me know, and for us to have a conversation about just how she grieved the loss. Because obviously, for my mother never experienced any child loss or anything. She got pregnant early in her 20s. She was 20 and 22 when she had me and my sister, so she was young. And she ended up having getting a hysterectomy early too, so she never really had to deal with all of the being pregnant in your late 20s and your 30s. She never really had to deal with that. So for her to share with me, that me overhear that in a conversation, and then for her to come back and say yes, she had to really grieve me losing the babies. It wasn't necessarily the loss of expectation for her too, because she wanted to be able to raise and have and be a grandparent to other babies, versus the one that she does have here with my son. And she really articulated that to me, and I got a lot of clarity and closure on that, because I didn't really think that it impacted my mother in particular until I heard her say that. So I'm saying all that to say is that even this is like, 10 years later, she's still talking about it and are, going through her own grief process. So it really doesn't matter. It doesn't really, we all have our timelines on what it takes for us to get to a place of healing where we're able to express ourselves freely and be sensitive to what is actually happening. But I felt honored that my mother acknowledged it, because a lot of people may not understand how impactful that is to for someone to hear that, let alone for her. It was more so for her, but it was really for me too, to overhear her in that conversation, and how healing that was to say, for her to say out loud that she has three babies,
Mhm.
three grandbabies, and two of them are in heaven. So I obviously, everyone else around me, my family and friends, I feel like going through what I went through kind of set the tone of a lot of my family and friends, where they've experienced losses, and I've been able to walk alongside of them through miscarriage, through infertility diagnosis, through friends going through the foster process or foster to adopt process. And it's only really strengthened the relationships I have with people, because people are able to be vulnerable to me because I've been more vocal. But it also has strengthened the relationships I have with everyone around me, because I know I can be there to support them the way they showed up for me, many, many, many years ago.
Yeah. And that's just the thing. I think a lot of times when somebody has a loss, you really often just think about your loss. You don't think about other people around you and how, because of course there's a connection for them too, and there's a love that they have for that child, that they, although maybe they're not necessarily the ones carrying it, but it could be the dad, it could be the grandparents, it could be, a number of different family and friends that also care and how they're processing that loss. And I think sometimes we only have this tunnel vision
Mm-hmm.
about what we're, enduring, and you don't even, and it's not even that you don't care, it's just that you don't even think about them.
Right.
So I'm wondering if we can actually talk a bit about how loss can include the loss of how you might, or how you thought you might become a parent. So for many of the intended parents I work with, they have to mourn the loss of the idea that they
Mm-hmm.
had of how they would become a parent. Even for you, just like you said, you still have your fallopian tubes and hopefully in your ovaries, and hopefully, something, whatever might be coming down the pipeline for you. But I think though there's still this mourning process that you have to endure, because I know when I had my hysterectomy and I wasn't planning on having any more children, whether it was for myself or surrogacy, pregnancy, or whatever. But I even still went through a loss in having to mourn the my uterus, if you will, as crazy as that sounds. So, how, like, what is your thoughts on that?
No, I think that that is a part of the lost community, the loss of the expectation of what we could have with a child, or the loss of a dream, because for many mothers who don't have the ability to get pregnant and stay pregnant, that it's the dream of being able to feel this baby move in my belly, and see the progression of my body changing. And for me, I have those same kind of feelings. Not having a uterus, I physically can't carry a child anymore. Although I have had the experience, it's just different. The fact that I know that I didn't cherish and honor that time that I could do it. And then now when I want it, I can't experience it again. So it's the loss of what that expectation could be if I could just, you know, get pregnant just like that.
Mhm.
So I believe that that is a big part of that ambiguous loss, is what we call it in the loss community. It's just the expectation of what could have been, and how we may have to change that trajectory to find joy in other parts of our journey to parenthood. and really work through what that means for you. How do you really feel about, not having those tangible things or the tangible evidence of a baby growing in your belly and actually birthing a baby versus actually going through the foster care process or the adoption process, which is still a faith walk, right? Going through just surrogacy, it's still a faith walk. We don't know what the outcomes of any of those situations are. No different than you being, you and your partner actually getting pregnant and sustaining a pregnancy. So it's really walking through and talking through that process, collectively with you and your partner, but also with a therapist, because I think a therapist can help you really flesh that out and really understand how to navigate that journey and how to really work through this ambiguous loss and how you're feeling and how things around you as you live your day to day can trigger you back to those feelings. And then how can you lean in and push through and move forward with the next steps on your journey. But I think it's a huge part of the loss community that we don't talk about. And I'm so happy that you brought that up, because for those of us who don't have the opportunity to have a child in the natural, I believe God can do the supernatural and
Mm-hmm.
move mountains out of the
Mountain.
way
That's
so that
right.
you can have the children that God intended you to have. It may not be the traditional way, but however he sees fit, the doors are open. It's just that we have to be willing to walk through them and really trust God and surrender to the process.
Yeah, definitely. And real quick, I don't know, you keep breaking up. I'm not sure if are you on your phone or are you on the computer?
I am on my phone. Hold on, let me make sure I'm connected to the internet.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. It sounds a little bit better now, but we'll
Okay.
continue on. I only have a couple more questions and
Oh,
then,
no problem.
but I think like this is so good. And so, but it's so many things that need to be discussed. So going back, you mentioned also getting counseling, and I know like with third party mental health is so important, and quite honestly, often the first step when someone is starting to do the third party reproduction journey. How important is grief counseling after someone has experienced the loss of a pregnancy, the loss of a child, or the loss of the expectation of what you thought your family journey was going to be?
Absolutely. The Having a counselor or a therapist is extremely important. And I would stress that they you get one immediately. And you may have to I say date around, like figure out which counselor is the best fit for you in your situation. So you may go through, two or three different therapists before you find someone who really understands you kind of vibe with, you really feel like you can be vulnerable to. And you want to find someone who really specializes and focuses on grief. Now, they may not focus on, the infertility portion or understanding of around pregnancy loss, but as long as they really can focus on grief and they really, you feel every session that you go to, you feel okay. You can break down some of those walls. You can really, they are working with you to open up and really share what's going on. That is going to help you navigate the journey, because obviously for many of us, we go right back into what our normal is, or this new normal of life, and not having someone there who is unbiased, who is there really to just help you navigate your feelings and just your mental, gives you a sense of really stability to have someone that you can talk to when something does come up and you're getting back to that new normal. And as you go back to work, as you go back to living your life, if something does trigger you, you can have that conversation in a safe place, and they can help you understand what you're going through, and make some light of it. Now, you may not get all the answers, like I question God a lot, like why, and I don't still think I've gotten that answer, but what I have gotten is a sense of purpose. I've gotten a sense of I found my joy again. I found a place, an assignment that I'm on right now to really help other women and help other couples. And I think that that may be for you. You may find joy in other things. You may find a new hobby. You may do something in the arts. You may really focus on something else that can bring you joy, but also can honor this loss, this ambiguous loss, this loss of expectation, this, the physical loss that you may have experienced. So I believe therapy is the catalyst for that, and that you should continue therapy even when you feel like, oh, I'm getting a little bit better. Because one thing that comes up in therapy relationships is obviously, no one has the perfect childhood. There's always trauma that goes on, and there may be trauma that you may not even thought was trauma that may end up coming up in therapy that you may need to acknowledge and really work through before you move forward with your journey. So therapy is so critical. It's so important, and I can't stress it enough. It's one thing I recommend immediately to people who come to me for help. I'm saying, hey, you definitely need to find a therapist. For those who are listening, psychologytoday.com, therapyforblackgirls.com. Those are some great websites to find you a therapist that is licensed in your state. And then obviously through COVID, everything's been virtual and online. So definitely go find someone that's unbiased, that you can talk to, that can help you navigate your feelings that you're going through now. And then as you continue on your journey, because I think that you still need a therapist as you continue on your journey to parenthood.
Well, that and also a therapist to just keep reminding you that you could have done everything right and potentially still experience a loss. And that loss is not an indication that it was your fault or there was a lack of worthiness or, something that you may have done. Just like, going back to, yes, you're going to question God why all day long. I think that is just human nature of trying to, knowing that we have a good father and that he loves us and cares about us, but then we experience these traumatic events. And it's just like, but how is that even possible? How is it that, you're a good father, but I just went through the most sorrowful, traumatic experience that anybody could ever go through. Um, and I know that for a lot of women and potentially even men and even family and friends around you, it's potentially something very hard to accept. What would you tell those women and and spouses and about going through that and those expectations?
I would tell people to really give themselves grace as they go through the process of therapy. And I think that's the reason why therapy is very difficult for people, and it's hard to find your rhythm with someone that you may not be willing to be vulnerable to. That's why I said it's probably going to take you a little bit to find someone that you really can talk to. But for, family and friends, partners who are really wanting to support, their partner through it, you definitely want to give them grace, allow them to really feel the feels and go through the motions and the highs and lows of the grief journey and grief and the stages of grief, because that is the way they are going to process it. Some people are process it out loud, where you can see it and it's very vocal and it's very colorful. And then some people are very inward and they may compartmentalize their trauma. And what therapy does is help you break down those compartments and open them up so that you can really take a look in and peek in and understand exactly what happened around that, so that you can put them to a different place and then get to the other side But it's I think we should always give ourselves grace, because it's you just never know how much the trauma that you experience has can be compounded from other trauma, and then it may impact future traumas or future events that come up in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. What do you want women who are suffering from loss with infertility and family building challenges to be aware of?
I want them to be aware of their overall reproductive health and really understand the ins and outs of their menstruation process, how if their uterus is shaped differently, if they do have underlying conditions, hormonal imbalance like PCOS or endometriosis or fibroids, that they or if they do have other issues like diabetes or high blood pressure or lupus, that they understand the how that contributes on them getting pregnant, staying pregnant, and bringing a healthy baby home, that they know the statistics, they know the evidence-based data that's around it, and then they know what they can do to create a right birth team or a reproductive team around them, so that they can carry out the wishes of becoming parents. And that may look like going through getting all the tests, getting up until a point where you're saying, hey, maybe I don't want to go down this path, but this is another path that I may need to explore and do some more research on. And that may look like adoption, that may look like surrogacy, and to not let cost be a factor for them to
Mhm.
get to that point. I think that for cost is a factor for a lot of Black people in general when it comes to fertility treatments, and even for adoption and surrogacy. And I don't want people to look at cost being a factor. I think that people have to look at the whole picture and really understand that, if this is something that you really want and that you dream and that you desire, that God will make a way for you to get that. You just really have to do the research. You really have to understand, and you have to have the right people around you, including doctors and specialists who understand that and understand how you can get to achieve this goal, this end goal, which is to become a parent. So that is what I hope. I really, really hope that people take away from just being a part of the community, and they really understand just how common loss and infertility is amongst Black people. It's so common.
Yes. Oh gosh, unfortunately that it is. So my last question for you, I know your 2021 word is resilience. Um so tell me what your hope for is in 2021.
My hope for 2021 is that everyone who is connected to me, who's in my circle of influence, who is our and my family and friends, truly find their purpose in 2021 by something that I do, by something that I say, or by an action that I take. So, my prayer every day is just, Lord, who can I be a blessing to every day? Who can I uplift every day? And my goal is to do that by really surrendering to God and just being resilient in everything that I do. So that is my hope for 2021. And then everything else will fall in a line, whether it's professional goals, it's personal goals, all of that'll fall into place. But I really am trying to be more of a servant and just saying, who can I be a blessing to, Lord? Who are you going to put me in my path today so that I can do that, and really surrendering to whatever he says goes this year. So that is what my goal for 2021 is.
Yes. Hopefully that's the goal for everybody because we all need to as a society, it doesn't matter color of skin or what you're going through or what everybody is enduring. We all need to kind of, have that servant heart and be willing to also be open to see each other's perspective. And actually, funny enough, that's my 2021 word is perspective this year. So that's what I'm trying to be open and being willing to see what somebody else has to walk through and endure and be open to seeing their perspective on what their what their journey is. So um, but Erica, I just want to thank you so much for sharing with us and for all the important work that you're doing, and not just really for the Black community. I think this goes across the board. It doesn't really matter. When we experience a loss is a loss. It doesn't matter the color of your skin. It doesn't matter if you are straight or gay or whatever. A loss is a loss, and you're going to feel that pain. So I really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, it was a pleasure, and I know we're going to be speaking again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Same. I hope you found this discussion helpful as you weigh your next steps. You can follow Fertility Cafe on its new Instagram and Facebook channel under Family Inceptions. If you haven't yet, go to your listening platform of choice and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. We'd also love you to share Fertility Cafe with friends and family members who would benefit from the information shared. Join us next week for another conversation on modern family building. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, remember, love has no limits, neither should parenthood. Going to redo the introduction. Hello, and welcome to Fertility Cafe. I'm your host, Eloise Drain. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Erica McAfee. Erica is the founder and CEO of Sisters in Loss, a maternal child health company that helps Black women replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. She is also a certified birth and bereavement doula, doula trainer, and mentor, and mom to two babies in heaven and one rainbow baby, Maxwell, also known as Super Mighty Max. Sisters in Loss provides pregnancy, birth, postpartum, bereavement, and grief services to help women step beyond anxiety and fear and into trust and peace after loss. Its self titled podcast spotlights resilient Black mothers who share intimate details of their journey to motherhood through painful but inspirational loss and infertility stories. Welcome, Erica, to the show. So great to have you join me.